Hi, and welcome to Absolutely Not. Thank y'all so much for being here with me. My name is Katrina Stroll. My pronouns are they, she, he, and you can learn more about me at my website, www.katrinastroll.com. Real quick, if you appreciate the work that I do here or elsewhere, please visit the Support the Mission page of my website. There are several options to choose from, so please choose one. The keywords for this episode are anti-Blackness, racism, and liberation. I encourage y'all to look up the definitions of these words and compare them to the definitions you carry with you on a daily basis. If you need help comparing, please let me know. This episode is sponsored by Headspace. Headspace has one mission: to improve the health and happiness of the world through meditation, sleep, stress, and mindfulness. Find out more about Headspace at the link in the show notes. Today's episode is titled, You're Anti-Black as Fuck. Soak it in, soak it in. And that amazing message is brought by my even more amazing special guest, Joquina Reed, she, her. Joquina wears multiple hats, but the most important hat she wears, yes, son. Okay, I'll get you some right after this, okay? Okay, I love you very much. Okay, is being a fabulous aunt to 8 nieces and nephews. In addition to being Nanny Kina, she is also a justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion practitioner and owner of J. Reed Consulting, LLC. She is the creator behind the Divesting from Whiteness and the Please Say Black podcast and curator of the Anti-Blackness Reader Project. As a lifelong learner and educator, she affirms the words of her great ancestor, Anna Julia Cooper. The cause of freedom is not the cause of race or a sect, a party, or a class. It is the cause of humankind, the very birthright of humanity. She identifies as a Black woman. Joquina, thank you so much for being here today.
Hey, Katrina, and listen, you can call me Kina through the rest of this recording, because that's what everyone calls me.
And I appreciate the permission in this space, because permission is what I'm looking for in a lot of spaces before I kind of insert myself into a relationship with people that I don't have that relationship with. Speaking of relationships, I would love to talk about the title of this episode, You're Anti-Black as Fuck. Are we talking to somebody in particular? A group of people?
No, not at the time. Not when I decided on that title. There wasn't a specific person in mind. There definitely has been, if I had to cite specific people, spaces, of course I could do that work, but that's not where we are here today. We're not trying to get Shady Kina out, although Shady Kina might show up. But that's a general statement. Everyone is anti-Black until they're not.
Everyone is anti-Black until they're not. Do people know that, Kina? Are people aware?
Are they aware? I don't think so, Katrina. I don't think so. Especially this new class of anti-racist people. In 2020, they were all like, oh, yeah, I care about Black folks. So I don't think they know that. I don't think they do.
And Kina, is it important at all to separate anti-racism from anti-Blackness?
See, why are you trying to make me shake?
These are questions. I wrote them down.
Yes, it is. I've done a lot, and I'm continuously doing work to make sure that when you hear Kina on Absolutely Not, it's the same Kina that you're going to hear on Divesting from Whiteness. It's the same Kina that you're going to hear at the park. Like, wherever I show up, I try to show up full and authentic. And I say that it was work to get there, because it wasn't always like that. That wasn't always the case, if I'm keeping it a buck. And so with that being said, yes, it is absolutely important for folks to be able to understand the difference, because if everything is racism, then nothing is racism at all. And that's Kina authentically showing up, being honest in this space.
Oh, somebody needs to digest that. Some anti-racism practitioner is going to have a hard time digesting if everything is racism.
Some white woman who's gonna get a $10,000 check today
is shaking in her Balenciaga whatever boots right now. But why is, okay, so you said that it took you a long time to be the same person in every area, mainly because of this distinction, and it wasn't talked about beforehand. How did this distinction allow you to be authentic in all spaces?
So here's the thing, and I mean, I tried so much, Katrina. First of all, thank you for having me. I didn't say that. Thank you for having me, for trusting me. I'm assuming there had to be a certain amount of trust for me to come into your sacred place. So thank you for offering that to me. I appreciate that. But to respond to your question, yeah, because so I don't want to get into semantics, right? Because it's very easy to get into semantics in the work that you and I do. And it's like you say cat, I say kitten, whatever. And sometimes that nuance is necessary, right? So I do want to say that nuance is so necessary in any liberatory practice, in any healing justice work, right? But I am of the belief that Black folks, that people of the global majority can't be racist, right? And if that is the case, then me living my life like I can't be racist also kept me from thinking about the shit I am. And so understanding and unpacking, exploring anti-Blackness allowed for that deep reflection, allowed for that healing, right? But if racism was the only thing we talked about, which for a long time, that's the only thing that I knew to talk about, and I knew I wasn't racist, and I stand by that, all right? And I actually have some feelings about who can and who can't be racist, and that's a whole different conversation that we are not gonna do today. But I'm just saying, while I was only considering racism, then it really didn't allow me to do that introspection that is so necessary, so necessary. And so my belief is this: I'm not racist, but I am anti-Black. I have internalized anti-Blackness. Everyone does not need to agree with me on the call. Fight your mom if you're mad. But like, seriously, it created the space for me to think about how much of this we shouldn't say the Kool-Aid. How much of this iced tea I've been drinking.
And had you not taken the time, you would never found out like, oh, and who made this iced tea? Where did this iced tea come from? What brand is this? How long?
Right? Yeah. I also think, and again, I'm saying this at your place, and then I'm going, it's like, you know, like how, this is what's great about being an aunt. Like I could sugar up the kids and then I'm dropping them off. I don't, you got to figure out how to get them to bed. Which by the way, I'm not that aunt. I'm actually really, really thoughtful. I don't sugar up the kids because I'm like, listen, I'm not going to make this harder for my siblings. Okay. But I am saying this over at your shit. So like, if there are people who are mad, like, I don't know, like, I guess you could send it back to me, Katrina. But I just think that we live in a world that is deeply colonial. Like that is not something, that is a global phenomenon. It's not an issue. Empire is not just in one place in this world, it's everywhere. And we aren't just dealing with the institutions that are in our spaces, but we're dealing with institutions that are in all spaces. And so an invitation for like, where does empire show up and how I act and how I believe, how I see the world, is really essential to come back home to oneself.
To come back home to oneself. And for anybody who is listening to this, who hasn't found their way home yet, Kina, could you talk about how anti-Blackness kind of showed itself in you or still shows itself in you?
Okay, so I'm going to answer your question, but I'm real Southern. So we go down to Mississippi and up to Mississippi before we answer a question. All right, that's just the reality. I have accepted that about myself. All right, so I'm going to tell you a story and then I'm going to answer that. Last summer, probably towards the end of the summer, that's not important, but the point is I was dealing with really bad insomnia and I had woken up real early for me, like 6 o'clock in the morning, okay? And I was like, I'm not going back to bed, whatever. So I went to Walgreens, okay? And it is important for people to have the timestamp of what I'm talking about. So it's about 6 something in the morning, okay? The sun just came up, all right? And it's a Sunday, so it's the day after Saturday, all right? And so I pull into the Walgreens parking lot, and a Black guy rolls up in one of those Pimp Daddy cars. I don't know, old Cadillac, whatever, but I mean, have the imagery in your head, okay? And I remember I got out the car, and the smell of his marijuana was so strong that I immediately smelled it. Not critiquing the marijuana here, y'all. Follow me through the story. And he gets out the car. Brother has on 5 different prints. Like he like, I don't even know all the prints, but it ain't just one. All right. Music is loud as hell, right? So there's the marijuana smell, there's the 5 different prints, there's the loud music, right? And everything it's giving, I just left somebody's house. It's giving, I was at the club last night. It's giving, I was turned up last night, you know? And I remember seeing him, and as I was walking into the Walgreens, I was like so happy for him. I was like, yes, get your whole life. You out here playing loud music, smoking your loud marijuana. At any point in time, an agent of the state could shut your shit down. And all I can feel is just such complete joy, because that was at that time like Black joy at its fullest, you know? What's more, like he was full on, like it's a Sunday. Like I said, he probably rolled up from somebody's house, but just like it was all, that's what I saw. And I remember when I was walking to the Walgreens, I was like, look at you evolving, Kina, look at you healing. Because I kid you not, 5, 6 years ago, in that same instance, that wouldn't have been my reaction. My reaction wouldn't have been, look at this Black man being happy out here in the streets. It would have been like, oh my gosh, he's making us all look bad. Oh my gosh, the smell of the marijuana. Like that, I'm not telling you about somebody else, I'm talking about myself. Like I just would have felt like, this is so embarrassing. He needs to get back in the car, you know? And like even the trajectory of that, to go from being the person who would have felt comfortable policing and judging another Black person, to being the person who's like, look at this joy all over the place. And it made me happy when I walked through the Walgreens. And so I share that story, I guess, in an anecdotal way to really highlight that at my most internalized anti-Black self, it was easier to police and to judge and critique Black people, other Black people, than to be empathetic, to be compassionate, and to see that joy and to see the need for rest and to see the need for ease. It was easier to be the Kina that was like, y'all Negroes need to get it together, as opposed to, oh, what can I do to be supportive and amplify the needs of the community? And so, trying to go back to answer your question, the way that I personally kind of like reflected anti-Blackness is by not seeing the fullness of folks who look like me. And that's a central component of it. I know you haven't asked this question, so I don't want to get ahead of you, but yeah, that's how it showed up. It was in the critique, it was in the policing, it was in the devaluing of the experience, all of those things.
And not to assume, but mostly because it was attached to a Black person, like the devalue, like they could have been doing anything yes, outside of whiteness, and like, okay, that is
exactly. If you're not doing it like the white folks are doing it, you're doing it wrong.
And that's what I need for people to understand is anti-Blackness is so very simple to kind of comprehend, but it's not being spoken about enough. And that's where racism, if everything is racist, then nothing is racist. Y'all need to get into the invisible hierarchy of what's in your brain. Do you have an invisible hierarchy that you kind of checkmate in your brain at all?
Ask me that again. Expand on that question.
So I love to quote Or, I mean, okay, so there's this amazing resource that I love to tell people about. It's called Liberated Love Notes. It's by Brittany Janae
Okay.
Harris, she, her, but she
Just
also,
say less, say less, say less. I'm
but she
already
also,
on that.
but she also has a podcast. And on the podcast, she kind of touched on the Brittany Janae, we speak your name. I know you hear it.
I keep one on deck. I keep a deck on deck.
I also have a deck on deck. But in one of her podcast episodes, she talks about a Black gay man mistreating a Black trans woman. And the Black trans woman eventually ends up helping this Black gay man find shelter, and he apologizes. And then she says, "You're a Black gay man. Who else are you going to shit on?" So that hierarchy exists in America. People don't talk about it enough, but it definitely includes anti-Blackness, which Black people are at the very bottom. Have you thought about that hierarchy of recent?
I think I have, but I've thought about it by way of, it's ironically like calling to our earlier moment before recording. I've thought about it within the Black church, right? So let me be a little bit more specific.
Okay.
Here in the United States, because Black people exist everywhere. We are the most diverse group of people in the whole world. And Black people make all types of people. So listen, and here in the United States, in particular, Jim Crow United States, the first place where, and I'm being a little gendered here too, right? So the very first place where people who identify as Black males get to find some semblance of respect, and I use that term loosely, is actually in the Black church, right? It is a place where Black men aren't boys, right? It's a place where Black men don't have to move on the side of the sidewalk, right? Like, it's one of the first places where, Black folks don't necessarily have to be like walking over with a pretend hump, right? And so the Black man gets very much to be, and that is actually very true even to this day, gets to be at the top, right? And so I've actually thought a lot about what does it mean that in the space where Black folks, and particularly Black men, were able to have some level of like social esteem, that a lot of them, not all, use that as leverage for predatory behavior and violence.
And acknowledging that is extremely important, or else it will continue. Have you ever had to?
It has continued. Creflo Dollar getting on Aretha Franklin's internet a few weeks ago and being like, "Ooh, everything I've been teaching y'all about tides." And the internet's like, "Wow." Well, the Black internet's like, "What do you mean?" Right? So you got people who are like, "I've been tired forever." Then you got people who are like, "Well, I'm glad you finally said it." And then you have me like, "So you're gonna give some of that money back though?" Because like, right? Like that's what I'm talking about, predatory violence, right? In those spaces. And we do hierarchy in the community of who is supposed to be able to access the limited agency we already have.
What they always talk, I really hate this analogy, but they always talk about crabs in a bucket or something like that. I really hate that analogy, but I can't think of anything else. What I love, the words that you're using, is violence. I see people use the words harm. I see people use the words unsafe, myself included, and violence to describe these acts, while not physically violent, that are still violent towards our communities. Have you ever had to describe your definition of violence or harm or unsafe environments to someone who did not understand?
So now I am going to be shady, Kina, for a second. So by trade, I guess, I am a Jedi practitioner. People hire me to help them work through justice, diversity, equity, and inclusion issues. That's not a secret, all right? But at one point I was talking to another DEI practitioner, and there was a conversation along the lines of, "Well, Kina, we're here to reduce harm," which is a lot of the favorite things, my favorite things, reducing harm. And I was like, "Oh, excuse me, there's some confusion about what I'm here to do. I'm here to eliminate violent systems." And I had to explain to said DEI person what that shit meant. And so that's the most recent instance I can think of having to break that down, right? And so I'm gonna pull the analogy full circle, because that's the teacher in me. If you are sitting at a church where we've been working on the same building fund for 25 years and nothing has changed except for the pillows on the pews, right? And that is literally changing your material consequence, right? That is like fundamentally. And also, let me just say this. I am not telling people that they cannot give their 10%, 11% to whoever. That is your Black business. But what I am going to name is that is a violent thing to ask people who have very little access, very little material, very little resource to give them what they have for especially a consistent amount of time in relationship to what you are getting from those people, right? And so the Black churches are really, and let me also say this, as someone who loves all Black shit, because somebody might listen to this later and be like, man, she's just a hater. No, I am not being a hater. Multiple truths can be, like, both things can be true at the same time, that I can love something and also critique it, right? And question the thing. And so what does it mean that we have literally seen this over and over again, where the pastor literally has a brand new Rolex every year, and the congregation is actively working hard to make sure that he can always have a brand new Rolex, and they can, every 3 years they can give him a brand new pimped out car, but it hasn't physically changed the status of the people who are in the building. That is a violent act. It is. Because anything that reduces my agency, anything that reduces the likelihood that I can have access to protections, limited though they might be, that stuff is violent. It is. It's very violent. And I just again want to go back to the DEI moment. When I said that to the person, like, they were shocked, at, like, just shocked, like, but wait a second, but you mean, like, not, like, I'm teaching about unconscious bias, and that's the thing. What? You want to make people perpetual users? No, no, that's not what I didn't sign up for that shit.
Because what is that doing? Unconscious bias. It's been 2, 3, 4 years of unconscious bias training.
Katrina, listen, we need to come back. I'm going to have you over at my spot, because we're going to talk about what does it mean that even as we are seeing an industry kind of created before our very eyes, like, what does it mean that we live in a hypervigilant capitalist society that has placed no value on human life in general? It doesn't matter what your social identities are, right? But again, to a certain extent, people get more protections based off those things, how their proximity to whiteness, that kind of stuff. And so we have been conditioned to always choose we all have been conditioned to choose this violence for ourselves, because that's what's been offered, right? That's what's constantly being offered. And I also think it's important to make, like, I don't know if you want to ask me this or not, what, like, those distinctions between anti-Blackness and racism is, because I know I get that question a lot, like, how are they different things too? But I didn't know if you wanted to bring that up or not.
So that is work that people can actually do on their own, which is why I've kind of skipped over that question. Okay, also, awesome. If y'all are unaware, which we talked about in the bio, Kina has tons of resources to describe that nonetheless. So y'all are not here for that. We're not doing one-on-one here. We are past one-on-one.
Okay, good. I'm glad. I just wanted to make sure, because I want to be thoughtful about who, yes, I gotcha. I'm on the same page.
Okay. So, but y'all, so you're aware, we are aware of that distinction and how it is harmful and perpetuating these systems of violence. I love that you talked about the fact that we make conscious decisions to choose violence for ourselves. Kina, do you make conscious decisions to choose violence for yourself because of the systems you're in?
Yeah, so because I'm further enough in my journey, it's not above me, right? So I want to be real careful. It's not above me to do it, but it's kind of also kind of hard at this point. I've come too far from where I started from. I remember specifically when last year I left one organization and started to work for myself, right? And I won't get in particulars, but I remember like, shit, can I go back in time and not know the shit that I know? Like there was a period where I was just like, okay, if I could just wake up and go back to sleep, right? Like if I could literally not know the things, right? Like if I can literally go back to that institution of higher learning and just get a job there and act like I don't know the academy is set up for racial hazing on purpose. Like I don't know that the academy is set up to like create a whole bunch of workers. Like I don't know that most academic institutions on the United States are literally on indigenous lands. Like if there was a way to go back and not know those things so I can like continue to have healthcare access, to continue to have a steady stream of income, like where can I go back in time? And so in those moments, it does feel like a choice, right? To say, I'll go along with the get along to get the things, right? And this is an uncomfortable truth, Katrina, that we, and I'm talking about we as in Black folks, need to really reckon with, right? What does it mean? I'm going to even be more specific. I'm talking for you, but you can also be like, fam, that ain't me. Don't put me in that, okay? Don't put me in that shit. So that's okay. But we have access to more things based off of education, experiences, even economic things, right? Do you get what I'm saying? Like, I've never had to work 3 jobs. I worked 2 jobs once, and I was like, woo, okay? But because of my education, that gave me some proximity, yeah? And that means I have access to things that other people who look like me don't have. I have to be honest about that shit. I do. I just have to, right? And so I think that being a person who got the access, that proximity to whiteness, there were times where I chose to align with whiteness for my own individual benefit. That was me consciously choosing violence. Right? Now, you could sit here and we could complicate that shit by saying, well, Kina, yeah, you did it, but that's also for your own protection. And I can make space for that, right? But I just think we need to complicate it. I'm going to use this term, and I'm going to say, if you're not Black, don't repeat the shit that's coming out my mouth right now. Okay, this is Black folks only. I use the term gated community Blacks. And I say, I can say it because I used to be one, right? Whenever I was a Black person who was entirely concerned with respectability, entirely concerned with being affirmed by white folks, because that's a very real thing. We don't talk about that shit either, right? And your favorites on LinkedIn and all over the place are seeking white confirmation. You can find me, don't find Katrina, I said that out loud. So like, those are the things that I mean when I'm saying choosing violence. I was aware of what I was doing. You know, we talk about this on the internet like pick-me's, right? That's the language, right? Like, oh, you a pick-me. Well, Black people are pick-me's for white people all the damn time. So that's what I mean when I say choosing violence, right? And again, I'm not pointing my finger at someone. I'm talking about me. Those are the kind of choices I make. I mean, even to the extent where, like, you're setting up your website, right? And this is something that recently happened. And so it's like, what stock images are we gonna use? And at one point you could say, well, we're gonna be inclusive. And I think there's value in that for sure, right? But there's also been points where I'm like, well, but am I gonna show a picture of a Black person in like with this kind of aesthetic? Because that might be disarming to people who are not Black. And so that's what I mean, like never, when we resist the desire, no, let me rephrase that. Not showing the fullness of ourselves, right? When we have the agency that allows us to, is choosing violence.
I love that you brought up the website, because do you know how many limited designs there are for websites, and they all cater to whites? People who shop at TJ Maxx or Home Goods and all of that, it looks exactly the same. Like it looks so very similar. So I just want y'all to know that you can You can choose violence on very small levels and very big levels, but nonetheless, you will have to choose that violence, and these are choices you are making. We're not judging you. We're just letting you know you're making this.
We're just letting you know. Let's talk about, oh gosh, Katrina, I might need you to help me. HBCU, Atlanta, Sean King, as alumni, not Spelman. It's like the Sean King. Someone in the chat help. Sean King is an alumni from this place. And it is, I'm pretty sure it's Atlanta. Crap. This is so sad. And I want to Google it, but then my brain is like, no, don't you dare Google this. You should know this information. Morehouse, yes. Yes, Gabrielle, Morehouse. Don't tell, edit that part out, Virginia. Edit out the part where I couldn't figure out Morehouse University. But recently, Morehouse University this year, not too long ago, hired a person racialized as white. Don't have any problem with people who are racialized as white, but hired them for like communications director. Okay, that's what they did. Historical Black college hired, and we're going to soon giving a 6-figure salary to Becky to be communications director. I want to, again, I'm just going to show up, Kina, however, this is who I am. This is the person I am. You get what you get. How many Black folks did they pass over to give Becky that 6-figure job?
And what was the reason? Because what qualifications does she have for a historically Black college?
So and the institution itself was created to create opportunity for Black folks because of the lack of opportunity.
To communicate for this historically Black, because
you're gonna be the face. And you're going to be the gatekeeper, because like, let's think about the role. We're not just talking about somebody who's teaching English. You are literally the person who's the face of the communication, the translator of the university, the translator of Black men, and that's who goes there. And that's a whole different conversation.
Ooh, so to anyone who is listening to this, who may have just awakened or opened your eyes to the small acts of violence you are doing in your daily life, I hope that you take this messaging away from you and just like, okay, I'm acknowledging the small acts of violence I'm doing to myself, my communities, people that look like me, people that have not the privilege that I have. Kina, to the people who are like, oh shit, I gotta stop doing these acts of violence, what would be the top 3 tips you would share with them about stopping the process?
First one, stop seeking white confirmation and affirmation. I get, like, I really want to be sensitive to Katrina because I actually get why, right? So part of what anti-Blackness does is the denial of our humanity, right? And so the way it's set up is like the people who are fully human are people who are racialized as white in our current system, right? And then again, here in the United States, because I do want to be specific, that racial hierarchy is not the same in Thailand. That racial hierarchy, right, is not the same in the Philippines, right? So this is a very US-centric conversation right here, although anti-Blackness is global AF, all right? It's not just a here problem. And so what I would tell them, the first thing is, because of the history, because we've been taught that if you want something to be legitimized, then a white male has to be the legitimizer of it all, right? If you want something to count, then a white person has to give it like a check mark, right? So I understand the underpinnings of seeking white confirmation and affirmation, but that's the first step. Like, stop, right? And I know it's easier said than done, right? But, and I think I made a TikTok about this. Like, everything you are, and that's actually true for all human beings. The violent systems require us to rely on them. We're consistently externalizing what is innate, right? So I have value because I'm human and I breathe. That's it. That's the math. It is not complicated physics, all right? You don't have to borrow 2, carry the 1. It ain't Eureka. I have value. I am a human being who breathes. The end. That's the tweet. All right. But violent systems require us to externalize that shit. So my value is tied up to my partnership, or it's tied up to what I own or what I have access to. We have to unlearn that. And so I understand why on some very like conditioned level we seek that kind of affirmation, but that's the first thing we have to stop. Here's the second thing, and this is tricky, and I'm saying this as someone who's walking through this every day. We, especially for those of us who are seeking justice, especially along the racial equity stuff, right? Because there's a lot of places where justice needs to be sought, all right? Because there's a lot of violent systems. But the second thing I want to make note of is you could spend your whole entire life utilizing all your energy to manage the conflict outside, right? Be more specific. I could spend my whole life talking to white people about how not to kill my Black ass. Literally, 90% of my energy can go to that. Talking, convincing people who are not Black that my humanity matters. But the problem is it keeps you on a cycle, right? And so one of the things I've had to start telling myself, right, when I'm talking about my time, when I'm talking about what I have access to, is that the onus, right? My energy goes to me, we, and everybody else. That's like what I've been doing all this summer. It's what I owe myself first and foremost, because I've been conditioned to think about myself last, right? That's not just white supremacy. That's like the patriarchy. That's like all these other things, right? So me, we, and by we, people who look like me, and then what I have left, I freely give to others. That's the hierarchy. That's literally the hierarchy. Now I'm breaking this down really simple, but I can cite so many people who were like, you know, like reinforcing that work. You know what I'm saying? So we're not talking about being self-centered because that's ego-driven, but we are talking about finding the self and what needs to be centered in the self. My joy, my ease, my peace. So that is the second thing. Stop giving all your energy away to people, spaces, and causes, right? And I mean, some of the work does have to be, if you so desire, right? That is fine, but you can't keep giving 90% of your shit to other folks. That's my second tip. Learn how to find that balance. And it's not just work balance. Katrina, I can't ever figure out how to take care of you if I'm never thinking of you, if I'm never with you, right? You see what I'm saying? If I spend all my time trying to get Becky and Karen's together, then I'm never thinking about how can I be supportive of Katrina. I'm not doing that. We don't have any time for us, right? And so that's the second thing. And I think the third thing I would just say is, oh, gosh, this is really simple, but it's also really big. A huge component of anti-Blackness is denial of the humanity of Black folks across the diaspora, right? And one of the most sacred things we have access to is our breath. And so I think it feels really cliche to be like, ooh, breath work, ooh, take a deep breath. But breath is sacred. Learn how to get into it. Learn how to measure it. Learn how to be intentional. Learn how to make your breath like more than just oxygen going in and out the lungs. Because it's so sacred, it's so divine, and literally people are trying to take that shit from you every day. And again, I can cite amazing scholars that talk about asphyxiation, right? It is not, we should not take it lightly that Eric Gardner, that Mr. George Floyd, and countless other Black people have literally died. And the last thing they've asked for is access to breath. We should not take that lightly at all. We are literally living in a country that doesn't want you to breathe. And for some people that might seem dramatic or scary, right? I mean, I get that with you, but for me, that makes it that much more impactful for me to do this shit. In fact, I'm just gonna say this, even watching you with your baby, like, we live in a country that doesn't want Black folks to parent, doesn't want Black folks to breathe. Like, it's just, the list goes on and on of all the things that we have to do intentionally, because that is the resistance. So for Black folks who do feel like they have to spend all their time, right? Because they're like, that's the work, that's the work. We use that term a lot. That's the work, right? I gotta like convince everyone to believe in that it's a do the right thing. If you don't do nothing else but breathe every day, you done done the work. I don't know what to tell you, right? I get to choose how I use my resources to educate others, yes. But if tomorrow I woke up and my Black ass was like, and I am done, then I am done. And I don't owe anybody else shit at that point. So those are my 2 things. Breathe, stop seeking white affirmation. Oh, and the second one, make space to not externalize all your energy.
And I love that. And this is why I love this space so much. And I love that you came in this space full throttle, baby, because some of these people need it. As you have seen, several people have left during this conversation. And I hope they took what they needed, but they probably didn't. But that has nothing to fucking do with the work that we are doing here. And that's what I'm going to take from this conversation for the rest of my life, is that the breath that I am taking today, the conversation that I'm having that is not centered on whether or not Becky took some shit from this conversation, is the work that needs to be done. So Kina, thank you so much for explicitly stating that in this space today.
I really want to tell you something I told Becky recently. Got on a call. I don't have no act right on the discovery call. I don't know how long I'm gonna be in business, Katrina, because I'm saying this on your podcast, like, Kina don't got no act right. Like, I was like, okay, you know, like I make my little notes, like these are the things, this is the template, and then I get in there, I'm like, yeah. But basically, long story short, this potential client was like, la 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 la, and I know I have to do this work for the people that I work with, blah blah blah. And I said, can you read that? Yes, I have to da 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 for the people. No, you got to do this for you. We got to reframe that shit, right? We can't let people in empowered places and the most resourced people amongst us walk around thinking that they're doing us a favor by ending violent systems, right? And so that's what I mean, like the onus has to change. So what I do, what I owe myself is what I owe myself. We can have conversations of what I owe you, and that's what makes even that Beyonce Khalees thing interesting, because there's a lot of questions that aren't said out loud, but it's something about what do we owe what do we owe each other, and we should make space for those conversations. But we need to stop walking around with this invisible like burden on our back that we have to keep convincing white people that we deserve to live.
Because what you say, my breath is like, I don't have to carry the 2, the 1, the nothing else. I am here, I am alive, I am human. I have earned the right to be breathing today. Kina, thank you so much for validating that in this space. Are there any last minute sprinkles you'd like to share with the people?
I don't have any more sprinkles. That was it. You know what I'm saying? Like, we got to change it. Like, come back to self, come back home. Oh, and then we should end how we started. Beyonce said, I'm free. You better twerk and get some deliverance.
If y'all have not heard Renaissance yet by Beyonce, if you're trying to sponsor, absolutely not, that would be great. But please listen to Church Girl, twerk your ass off and come home. You were born free.
Oh, you were born free. Listen, born free.
Oh, thank you so much, Kina, for this amazing conversation. As y'all have heard, she is everywhere and giving out free information, which is why we did not delve into that information today, because if you need it, go reach out. Her information will be in the show notes when this is published. To everybody listening, keep setting those boundaries and saying absolutely not to everything and anything unaligned.
I just want to say that absolutely not, that hit different. That hit different.
But
You know, I'm gonna be citing you too. I'm gonna be like, absolutely not. Katrina said it.
a lot of people are, you finna be cited every single time in another episode. Like, please go listen to the last episode because get it together.
Now that's what I really want us to get to, instead of explaining shit to people who, again, outside the community.
So I have several
like,
episodes.
You know, like how people, you know how like the white, like, you know, like cite, when people cite like policy line 567, we need to be like, actually go ahead and look up
Episode 86.
season 2, episode 4, and go have a good day.
Y'all heard it here first. Please start citing absolutely not and setting those boundaries. But we will see y'all next time. Bye.
Bye.